What if all your suffering is an illusion created by your own mind? 2,500 years ago, a man made a discovery that turned the understanding of the nature of human consciousness upside down. The Buddha discovered that the source of all pain is not hidden in the outside world, but in the invisible processes of our own mind. He unraveled the mechanism that generates desires, fears, and anxieties every second, and showed how to stop it. It's not a religion. This is a surgically accurate map of the human psyche, where every thought, every emotion has a cause and effect. Today, we will reveal an ingenious system of liberation from suffering that works regardless of faith or culture. Get ready to see your mind like you've never seen it before. Part 1. The Surgical Art of Awakening. Buddha's genius wasn't tied to mystical experiences, it was in how he analytically dissected them. While other spiritual leaders leaned on metaphors and lyrical language, he tackled consciousness like a pro, breaking it down into parts and showing how they lead to both pain and liberation. This thorough approach makes Buddhist psychology incredibly practical and something you can see for yourself. Each insight is something you can personally check out. The whole framework is based on 4 observations that seem straightforward, but can deeply transform how we relate to reality. These are known as the 4 Noble Truths, although the term truth can be a bit off in English. It would be better as noble realities or helpful insights. They're not just beliefs you accept, rather, they're truths you explore and directly experience. The first noble truth highlights that life involves dukkha, usually translated as suffering, but it covers anything less than fully satisfying. Buddha figured this out not from a negative perspective, but by clearly observing how consciousness operates. Even in happy moments, he saw there was a lingering sense of something missing, never quite hitting perfection. Consider eating when you're really hungry. The initial bites might hit the spot, but as you continue, the pleasure starts to fade, eventually becoming routine or even uncomfortable if you overdo it. This isn't because of flaws in food or hunger. It's just how experiences work. They arise, peak, and then inevitably fade, prompting us to seek the next source of pleasure. But Buddha's insight goes much deeper than this surface pattern. He identified 3 levels of dukkha present in all conscious experiences. The first is dukkha, the kind of suffering we all know: physical pain, emotional grief, losing loved ones, or the letdown of unmet wishes. This is blatant and confrontational. The second, viparinama dukkha, is subtle and trickier to pinpoint. It's about the suffering that comes from everything being temporary. Even the happiest moments are ticking away, instilling a quiet anxiety even in joyous times. Like when falling in love, it's exhilarating but often coupled with concerns. Will it last? Is their love genuine? Do I deserve this love? These worries don't stem from anything wrong, but from the deep-seated knowledge that nothing lasts. The more cherished something is, the more anxiety it brings over the potential of losing it. The third level, sankhara dukkha, goes even deeper, reflecting Buddha's profound psychological insight. This suffering comes from being conscious beings in constant flux. Even when life seems spot on, there's an underlying restlessness in everyday awareness. It's not about neurosis or mental issues, it's about consciousness trying to cling to patterns that perpetually change. Imagine trying to cement a stable self-identity in ever-shifting sands. Thoughts fade quickly, emotions morph, and bodily sensations are always in motion. Beliefs, preferences, and memories evolve or distort, and even our physical cells replace themselves every few years. Yet something in us craves stability amidst this chaos, always on the lookout for an anchor in the constant flow of change. Constantly trying to make what's ever-changing seem steady creates a hidden tension. The Buddha spotted that this third kind of suffering is so embedded in our daily consciousness that most people don't notice it. It's like a low background noise, adding an unsatisfying incompleteness to everything we experience. That's why, even with a good life, solid relationships, and rewarding work, people often sense something's lacking. It's why reaching long-sought goals doesn't always feel as gratifying as we expect. It's why our minds are always on the hunt for the next big deal, the next win, or the next solution to life's mysteries. The Buddha delved deeply into how these different kinds of suffering play off each other. He observed that our minds come up with complex strategies to avoid obvious pains, but these tactics usually worsen the subtle discomfort. Pursuing pleasure to dodge pain makes us clingy, amplifying the pain of change. Trying to establish a solid identity traps us in rigid thoughts and actions, intensifying the struggle to stabilize something in constant motion. He noticed we often point fingers at the world around us for our troubles, constantly trying to mix up our surroundings without grasping what's inside us that fuels our unease. People swap jobs, jump into new relationships, move to different places, or adopt new beliefs, thinking these changes will bring them lasting happiness. But the real issue is in how we deal with our experiences, not in the experiences themselves. These changes only provide temporary relief until inevitably the same patterns reappear. The First Noble Truth highlights how the Buddha took a distinct approach, setting himself apart from the spiritual and philosophical views of his time. Back then, religions mostly focused on uniting with cosmic forces, pleasing gods, or setting the soul up for a better next life. Instead, the Buddha honed in on how the mind creates its own suffering. His methods leaned more on healing and practicality than on mysticism or philosophy. He revealed that suffering isn't a punishment for our wrongdoings, a cosmic accident, or mainly thanks to outside influences. It stems from specific mental processes that we can observe, comprehend, and eventually alter. This understanding shifts suffering out of a religious discussion and into the fields of psychology and cognitive science. It suggests that freedom doesn't come from altering the universe or pleasing unseen powers, but from mastering the management of one's own thoughts. The Buddha recognized that people experience these three layers of suffering differently, influenced by their emotional development and life circumstances. Someone terribly ill or poor is mostly consumed by the obvious, immediate kind of suffering. For someone whose external world is stable yet has heightened sensitivity, the second kind, the quiet anxiety tied to fleeting happiness, might stand out more. For someone with more psychological maturity, the third kind, the underlying unrest, even in calm times, becomes more apparent. Armed with this knowledge, the Buddha crafted teachings catering to various levels of awareness and individual temperament. The Buddhist path outlines practical steps to address obvious suffering through moral living and basic meditation. It introduces advanced methods for those prepared to confront the subtle pain that comes from clinging to life's highs and lows. And it offers the most sophisticated practices for those ready to explore the deepest suffering rooted in the very nature of ordinary consciousness. The first noble truth sums up with arguably the most important insight. Recognizing suffering isn't about despair or giving in. It's about igniting what the Buddha called a profound spiritual drive, a motivation powerful enough to back the effort needed for a complete psychological transformation. Once you realize how much energy is wasted avoiding life's unavoidable bits, you start seeking more effective ways to handle it. Recognizing how much suffering comes from resisting reality's true nature, you genuinely strive to learn how to weave through life as it genuinely is. Part 2. Exploring Craving. Buddha's second noble truth might be his greatest psychological insight, surpassing anything Western psychology offered for over 2 millennia. He first realized that suffering is a universal aspect of conscious life, and then he dug into its causes. Instead of blaming outside problems, he discovered an internal process working silently beneath our everyday awareness. In its original language, it's called tanha, often translated as craving, but it represents a much deeper and broader concept than the usual meaning suggests. This craving isn't merely about wanting stuff. It's the urgent feeling that can cloud any desire, making it seem like your mental peace depends on getting, holding on to, or avoiding certain experiences. Buddha identified 3 types of craving that exist within normal consciousness, each creating its own type of suffering while also reinforcing the others in complex ways. Grasping these 3 kinds of craving gives a complete picture of how our minds trap us in misery. The first type, kama tanha, is the craving for sensory pleasure. It's more than just sexual desires. It's about finding satisfaction through our senses, looking forward to a tasty meal when hungry, seeking comfort when uneasy, longing for amazing sights, sounds, and textures. This craving seems natural, even vital for survival, making it powerful and rarely questioned at its core. Buddha's examination revealed a startling truth about this craving. Its fulfillment is always temporary, requiring more to maintain the same level of pleasure. This isn't a moral judgment, but a reality check on how our minds work when they rely on outside things for joy. The first taste of chocolate is heavenly. By the third, it's less exciting until further eating becomes mechanical or even unpleasant. More importantly, sensual craving builds a strong link between our mental state and external circumstances. When particular experiences become necessary for feeling whole, we become mentally vulnerable to their presence or absence. This vulnerability appears as anxiety when those beloved experiences are not around, clinging when they are, and a restless search when they're missing. The mind acts like a drug addict, always needing another pleasurable hit to maintain balance. The second type, bhavatanha, is the craving for existence or becoming. It's more profound than sensual craving, making it harder to notice. This craving pushes us to create, maintain, and enhance a personal identity. It's the desire to be important, achieve major goals, leave a lasting legacy. But it also appears in subtler cravings, like the need to win arguments, uphold opinions, or maintain a consistent self-image. This craving highlights the mind's desperate attempt to find permanence in what naturally changes. Every thought disappears quickly, yet the mind keeps trying to build a stable identity from these fleeting thoughts. Each role you play shifts with the situation, but consciousness longs for a fixed sense of self. Every success fades over time, yet the desire to become something more remains. Buddha observed that craving for existence creates a unique mental suffering almost unnoticed in daily awareness. It manifests as a persistent dissatisfaction with the present, because this moment never fully embodies the identity that the craving wants to make concrete. You're always on a path of becoming, never really reaching that imagined state of complete selfhood. This results in a lingering belief that real life awaits in the future, that fulfillment will arrive when you finally become the person you're meant to be. The third type of vibhava tanha is a desire to vanish or cease existing. It's tricky and dangerous, often disguising itself as insight or spiritual awakening. You might experience it as the urge to sidestep life's challenges by zoning out or steering clear altogether. It's like wishing for your problems to magically disappear, for tough emotions to stop bubbling up, or for complicated situations to resolve themselves without any effort. This kind of craving can be blatantly obvious, like when you're binge-watching TV, getting lost in work, or battling addiction. But it's also sly enough to fool even seasoned self-awareness practitioners. Picture a spiritual seeker more focused on rising above life's chaos than addressing it skillfully, or a meditator who uses mindfulness as a way to dodge tough feelings rather than understanding them fully. Even deep thinkers might retreat into their thoughts to avoid dealing with the messiness of relationships and responsibilities. The Buddha recognized that these cravings all have a similar core. They're about seeking comfort anywhere but in the present moment. Whether it's chasing thrills, trying to become something different, or longing to escape, the mind constantly searches for what truly exists only in full awareness. This perpetual chase for ease leaves you feeling uneasy, like you're never where you truly want to be. The Buddha took it further by dissecting the intricate workings of craving. He identified a series of mental processes happening countless times every day, often slipping by unnoticed. These processes begin when a sense meets an object. Your eyes catch sight of something, your ears hear a sound, or a thought pops into your mind. This interaction sparks a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, without any problem at first. The snag happens next. Craving steps in based on that feeling. A pleasing experience ignites a wish for more pleasure. A threat to your self-image triggers a longing for existence. An unpleasant event fuels a desire to escape. These reactions unravel swiftly, rarely caught by conscious awareness. Once craving appears, it sets off what the Buddha called upadana, often translated as clinging. At this point, craving evolves from a fleeting thought into a determined effort to alter reality. Clinging manifests as thoughts about the experience, ideas about its meaning, plans to get more or avoid it, comparisons to previous experiences, or predictions about future outcomes. The mind gets tangled up in these extra thoughts, losing touch with the original event. The Buddha described 4 main types of clinging stemming from the 3 cravings. Clinging to sensual pleasure, which involves more than just desires and includes the mind's pursuit of enjoyable experiences. Clinging to opinions and beliefs, which covers everything from deep philosophical views to daily thoughts about how things should be, rigidly adhering to rules and practices, whether moral codes or spiritual rituals, and clinging to notions of self, including all the ways we hold on to personal identity. These clinging forms intertwine to fuel what the Buddha called the wheel of becoming, a cycle that traps consciousness in loops of desire and discontent. Each act of clinging creates karma, intentional actions that shape future experiences. These karmic seeds then color how consciousness encounters new situations, compelling it towards specific cravings and clingings. This sets in motion a cycle where holding on to past experiences influences the present perspective, sparking new desires that lead to further attachment, affecting future perceptions, continuing the cycle. The Buddha's teachings explained why trying to fulfill desires by obtaining what we want ultimately fails. Our cravings aren't truly about what we're chasing. They're about trying to achieve a sense of security and completeness by controlling our experiences. But since experiences are always in flux, controlling them is futile. It's like trying to grasp water in your hands or catch a shadow. The more you chase satisfaction, the more it eludes you. What's even tougher is that each time we crave, we reinforce the brain pathways and habits that lead to more craving. Giving in to sensual desires only heightens our yearning for them. Struggling to maintain or boost our self-image ties us more to that image. Avoiding difficult situations just feeds our fear of them. Craving is like a self-fueling fire. It just keeps getting bigger, whether we satisfy it or not. That's why, even when people reach their goals, they might still feel a nagging emptiness. The second noble truth flips the concept of owning up to our own experiences entirely. A lot of self-help tips and spiritual paths tend to emphasize changing our surroundings, healing old wounds, or finding new coping strategies. But the Buddha's approach focuses on the minute-by-minute process of how our minds generate suffering. This changes our attention from merely what is occurring to how we are responding to it. It highlights that true freedom isn't about having flawless experiences, but about engaging with the moment as it is, without wishing it to be different. In Part 3, we dive into the idea of achieving complete freedom. The third noble truth makes a daring statement in human psychology history. Suffering, which seems a big part of our conscious life, can actually come to an absolute end. This isn't just for an instant, nor is it about making our external circumstances perfect. It's about fundamentally shifting our mental framework. This ultimate freedom is called nirvana, a term often misunderstood thanks to pop culture. Literally, nirvana means extinguishing or blowing out, like putting out a candle flame. However, it's not about snuffing out consciousness itself, but rather the compulsive thinking patterns that trap us in cycles of desire and misery. It doesn't mean zoning out, becoming emotionless, or retreating from life. Instead, it's about freeing the mind from habits that perpetuate suffering, making it clear and responsive without desperately needing change. The Buddha's view on nirvana flips our assumptions about what makes life meaningful. Described as the unconditioned, nirvana isn't about having certain conditions in place. It's called the deathless, not because it brings physical immortality, but because the endless cycle of becoming and unbecoming concludes. It represents ultimate security because the inner vulnerability that feels threatened is gone. But Buddha's teachings go far beyond poetic language. They dig into the psychology behind it. He identified what shifts fundamentally when cravings stop trapping our minds and what remains unchanged. Your senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, still operate normally. You still feel pleasure and pain through sensory interactions. The body still has its needs. Personal preferences, dislikes, and decisions remain. The change lies in how you respond to these experiences. In a free state, you enjoy good moments without clinging, face bad moments without resistance, and greet neutral ones with peace. Preferences remain, but are flexible, not turning into sources of mental distress. You can desire something without needing it for contentment. You can dislike something without rushing to alter it. You fully engage with life without depending on changing circumstances for happiness. Buddha offered powerful metaphors to illustrate this transformation, showcasing different aspects of liberation. Nirvana is like a fire that naturally burns out, not put out forcibly, but simply running out of fuel. The fuel for suffering is craving, and when craving dissolves through understanding rather than suppression, suffering fades. There's no force or struggle. It's like a fever naturally letting up. Nirvana is also seen as reaching the other side of a broad river. The near shore represents regular consciousness, caught up in cycles of seeking and dissatisfaction. The far shore stands for consciousness freed from these cycles. The river symbolizes the spiritual journey, the gradual path enabling the crossing. Once across, you no longer need the boat, but you remember the way you came. Liberation is part of and transcends the journey. Most importantly, nirvana culminates in stopping the constant idea of becoming, ending the mind's compulsive grasp on maintaining a separate self-identity. Every day, we burn a lot of mental fuel trying to protect, boost, and display our ego. Our brains are constantly evaluating who we are, comparing us to others, brainstorming how to keep our identity steady, and scheming ways to make folks see us how we want. But when we're in a state of clear consciousness, all that fuss just ceases. The energy we dumped into self-obsessed thoughts is now free to dive into reality as it truly is. According to the Buddha, true freedom springs from understanding, not from chasing achievements. Liberation doesn't come from acquiring something new, but by realizing that what you thought was there was never real. The self we cling to as solid and vital is really just a made-up concept, a process, not an object, more like a verb than a noun. When this clicks, you don't have to demolish or ignore the self. It stops being an issue because you recognize it for the misunderstanding it always was. Buddha's perspective on the self was a big departure from other spiritual paths. Typically, spiritual journeys aim to unite with a larger cosmic reality. Buddhism, however, unveils that the self, believed to need merging with anything grander, never existed independently. So, there isn't anyone to free because realizing liberation means seeing the one who thought they needed freeing was a case of mistaken identity. This realization doesn't lead to life seeming pointless. Instead, it uncovers the compassion and wisdom that lurked beneath ego-driven concerns. When the urge to safeguard and bolster a distinct self dwindles, the mind seamlessly connects with the suffering and joy of all beings. Ethics emerge naturally, without strain. Wisdom feels innate, not taught. Love turns infinite and uncalculated. The Buddha also delved into whether liberation is permanent or fleeting. He pointed out different types of realization. Some experiences fade, others endure forever. Temporary liberation might happen during meditation or profound moments of clarity, offering a sneak peek into what's achievable. Full liberation, however, signifies a profound shift in consciousness. Once it unfolds, it can't be undone, not because the liberated are flawless, but because they've pierced through the fundamental misconception that causes suffering so profoundly that they can't see it the same way again. The persistent nature of complete liberation is likened to not mistaking a rope for a snake once you've realized it's just a rope. You might still flinch if you see it in bad lighting, but you won't truly mistake it for a snake. Similarly, a liberated mind might still experience momentary likes, emotional ebbs and flows, or physical discomfort. But these don't lead to the additional suffering that resistance and desire typically do. They're just accepted as natural occurrences that pass, not as crises needing solutions. The Buddha also tackled the idea of what drives us and how we engage with life when we're not chasing desires. Many folks think life might feel dull or devoid without desire as fuel. But the Buddha paints a different picture. When we're not entangled in self-preservation, we engage creatively and spur of the moment with life. Our actions stem from wisdom and compassion, not need or compulsion, making them more impactful and fulfilling. The third noble truth sums it up by saying, liberation isn't a reward for being virtuous or a gift handed by another. It's the natural outcome of understanding the birth of suffering and dismantling its roots. This shapes Buddhism as a path grounded in experience rather than blind faith. You can verify each step by testing it firsthand. You can experiment with each insight by living it out. You can probe every assertion by closely observing your own mind. Freedom isn't a distant wish. It's something you can start cultivating right now by grasping what's really unfolding in your consciousness this very moment. Part 4. The Magic of Change. The fourth noble truth introduces a deeply detailed psychological training system, like a giant toolkit crafted over 2,500 years to change how we think and feel. It's called the Noble Eightfold Path. But don't think of it as a straightforward path. In English, path seems like you're moving step by step from here to there. Instead, these 8 elements come together as an interconnected lifestyle, each supporting the others. It all combines into what you might call tools to liberate your mind, a practical skill set to help master your thoughts. Traditionally, these 8 elements are grouped into 3 categories that address various aspects of human life. The wisdom category includes right understanding and right intention. These lay the intellectual and motivational foundation for everything else. The ethical conduct category encompasses right speech, right action, and right livelihood, offering the supportive environment necessary for tackling deeper mental challenges. Finally, the mental cultivation category includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, focusing directly on training the mind. But these groups are mainly useful for teaching purposes. In practice, you develop all 8 elements together, each enhancing the others. Right understanding, for starters, is about seeing reality as it is, especially grasping the 4 noble truths. It's more than memorizing facts like cramming for a test. It involves seeing how your thoughts can cause suffering, recognizing change is constant, and that personal identity is something we create. You gain this understanding by closely examining your life and learning from those who have already journeyed down this path. Usually, right understanding unfolds gradually. It begins with theoretical knowledge, the fundamentals of Buddhist teachings, gained by study and reflection. But you need to test these theories by observing how your mind operates, how desires manifest, and attachment causes trouble. Keep at it, and this understanding becomes a natural, immediate insight rather than a mental struggle. It's like getting a clear view. Right intention follows, and it's all about adjusting your motives for engaging in this practice. The Buddha identified 3 intentions that guide you towards freedom: letting go, kindness, and harmlessness. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning the world, but distinguishing between what truly matters and what only seems to. Real happiness isn't about collecting experiences or achievements. Instead, focus on what truly brings peace. Kindness involves genuinely wishing well for everyone, including yourself. It's not about forced politeness or feeling obligated to be nice. It's a natural result of realizing how interconnected everything is. When you see that everyone's welfare is connected to yours, caring becomes a wise choice for yourself too. Harmlessness naturally stems from kindness, involving avoiding causing unnecessary harm, whether to yourself or others. This includes obvious actions like avoiding violence and lies, but also subtler acts like gossip and harboring grudges. Right speech, the third element, deals with how you converse with others and yourself. Outwardly, it means avoiding lying, harsh language, gossip, and mindless chatter, while striving to speak truthfully, kindly, and helpfully, even if it means staying silent sometimes. But what's crucial is just how much the Buddha emphasized that the way you speak shapes your mind. Whenever you speak, you're influencing how your brain works and your thought patterns. Complaining makes you focus on the downside of things. Indulging in gossip shows you're more invested in what's going on in other people's lives. Using harsh words ramps up feelings of anger and defensiveness. On the other hand, speaking the truth brings clarity. Being kind boosts your sense of compassion. Having conversations with a purpose helps build wisdom. It's not just about what's said out loud. Your internal thoughts count too. We think about many different things each day, judging, planning, and reflecting on everything. This inner dialogue shapes our perspective on the world and affects every interaction we have. By getting better at recognizing and tweaking these internal thought patterns, you can really progress on the Buddhist path. It's not about trying to completely stop your thoughts, but more about learning to recognize unhelpful mental noise and gently steering your mind toward more positive ways of interacting with life. Let's chat about right action. This is about lining up your actions with insight and kindness. Buddha laid down some guidelines. Don't kill, steal, engage in sexual misconduct, get intoxicated, or lie. But sticking to these rules is just the beginning. It's about noticing how your actions send ripples out and impact you and others. Each decision you make leads to results that mold your mind and the world around you. Right action is about choosing paths that offer more freedom, wisdom, and empathy, avoiding those that bring about pain, confusion, and selfishness. Developing this ethical sensitivity involves being aware of how different actions make you or others feel, noticing the peace and clarity these actions might bring, or the chaos and turmoil they might cause. Eventually, acting ethically becomes second nature because you see it paying off in real time. Moving on to right livelihood, this extends right action into how you earn a living. Buddha advised against jobs that harm living beings, involve selling weapons, trafficking humans, or dealing with intoxicants and poisons. But really, it comes down to any job that clashes with your core values or adds to others' suffering. Right livelihood also entails having a balanced relationship with money and possessions, neither hoarding it nor completely rejecting it. Sometimes you have to wrestle with tough choices between what you ideally want to do and what you have to do to get by. In today's world, it's tricky to find jobs that totally align with Buddhist teachings, but the aim isn't to reach an impossible ideal. It's about continuously moving toward greater honesty and causing less harm. This might mean slowly transitioning between jobs, adjusting your current role, or just being more mindful about the ethics of your financial decisions. Ultimately, right livelihood is about understanding that how you earn and spend your money ties into your spiritual journey. Now, discussing right effort, it's about how you manage your energy both in everyday life and your spiritual practice. It's not about pushing through with sheer determination. Right effort is about wisely managing your mental energy and applying the right amount of focus in each situation. Apply too little effort, you might remain stuck; too much, and you create stress and resistance. Buddha likened this balance to tuning a musical instrument, finding that sweet spot where it plays perfectly. He outlined 4 specific ways to practice right effort, which we can explore further. To start, focus on avoiding negative mental states by being aware and steering away from things that might trigger harmful patterns. When negative thoughts arise, don't force them away or let them take over. Instead, observe them closely until they naturally fade. Next, work on fostering positive mental states that haven't yet appeared by setting the stage for wisdom, compassion, and peace to thrive. Lastly, nurture the good mental states you already have by valuing them and providing the right conditions for them to flourish. The 7th element, right mindfulness, is all about the skill of observing your mind without getting swept away by its chaos. This aspect of Buddhist practice really pops out and has left a significant mark on modern psychology and neuroscience. It's not just about unwinding, although it can help you chill out. It's not solely about positive thinking, even if it can boost your spirits. Mindfulness is all about getting good at staying in the moment without getting caught up in stories, judgments, or knee-jerk reactions. The Buddha set down 4 foundations of mindfulness to help keep your attention in check. Mindfulness of the body involves being conscious of your breathing, posture, bodily sensations, and actions. It anchors you in the present moment and provides something solid to latch onto when your mind is all over the place. Mindfulness of feelings means noticing if each moment feels pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, helping you recognize cravings before they take hold. Mindfulness of the mind equips you to observe your thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them, like recognizing anger without getting angry, detecting fear without succumbing to it, and noticing desire without being dominated by it. This offers you enormous psychological freedom, as you're no longer pushed around by every emotional upheaval. And mindfulness of phenomena allows you to see the natural ebb and flow of experiences, apart from your desires for them. Right concentration, the eighth part, is about training your mind to reach steady and clear states. It's not about zoning out, but about focusing intently on one thing without drifting off. The Buddha discussed a succession of increasingly refined states of focus, called jhanas, each characterized by calm, joy, and a unified mind. These aren't end goals, but tools for gaining insight and comprehension. To practice concentration, you might start by focusing on something simple, like your breath or an image. At first, your thoughts might go all over the place, and staying focused, even for a few seconds, might take a lot of effort. But with practice, your mind becomes steadier and your focus sharpens. As this concentration builds, you can experience deep peace and clarity, revealing what consciousness can be when it's not scattered. These concentrated states offer both a respite from everyday mental chaos and a foundation for exploring reality with unparalleled clarity. The Noble Eightfold Path is kind of like a comprehensive course on human consciousness, covering all aspects of mental, emotional, and behavioral functioning. Unlike other spiritual systems that might center on beliefs or rituals, Buddhism provides practical methods to change your interaction with experiences. It's profound enough to explore throughout a lifetime and practical enough to yield immediate benefits if you're open to trying it out. What's crucial is that you can challenge every part of the path through your own experiences, making Buddhism more about personal discovery rather than blind belief. Part 5 digs into the illusion of who we think we are. Buddhist psychology throws us a curveball with the idea that our identity isn't something solid or set in stone. It's more of an ongoing process, more like an action verb rather than a thing. This concept, called anatta, or not self, is one of Buddha's biggest revelations. It's not denying your existence. It's more about suggesting that you're not what you think you are. Buddha kicked off his quest to figure out the self with a surprisingly deep question. If a self exists, where exactly is it located? This isn't just philosophy. It's something anyone can dig into. So, when you go looking for that self you feel is so crucial, what do you discover? Is it hanging out in your body? Your body is in constant change, swapping out almost all its cells every 7 years. But you still feel like your usual self. Is your identity tied to your thoughts? Your thoughts are a running stream, popping up and disappearing, constantly shifting with the world around you, yet you still have this lingering sense of self. Or maybe it's in your feelings or personality. But even those change depending on your mood, your health, or who you're with. You know you're not the same person when you're worn out versus when you're energized, or when you're with family compared to being around strangers. You now versus 10 years ago have changed tastes, concerns, and interests. Yet, despite these changes, something keeps making you feel like you're still you. So, what's that mystery thing, and where is it hiding? Buddha figured out that what we call the self is actually a dance of 5 ever-changing elements, known as the 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Form is your body and the physical world around you. Sensation is the felt experience that pops up when awareness hooks up with sensory inputs. Perception is about recognizing and interpreting these sensory and mental cues. Mental formations include your thoughts, emotions, intentions, and habits. And consciousness is the basic awareness that makes experience possible. All these parts are in constant flux, continuously shifting and fading due to conditions. Every moment, countless little processes occur as these interact with environmental changes. The mind strings together a story of continuity and stability from this constant change, much like how a movie shows smooth action through a rapid series of still frames. The notion of a stable self is a complex mental construct more than a reality. Buddha's analysis dives into the deeper mechanics behind this illusion. He identified a psychological process that fuels the self-illusion. Consciousness keeps labeling every new awareness as me or mine. When a thought pops up, it feels like my thought. An emotion becomes my emotion. A sensation feels like it's happening to me. This continual labeling and claiming create the feeling of being at the center of it all. Yet there's a twist. You cling to what's ever-changing as if it's stable, claim processes that are fully impersonal, and treat conditioned phenomena as if they're a constant core. This leads to a persistent insecurity as you try to build a solid sense of self from ever-shifting elements. It's like trying to build a solid house on shaky ground or craft a lasting sculpture out of flowing water. The more you try to pin down a sense of self, the more uncertain and stressful it turns. The Buddha told an interesting analogy for this situation. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. Similarly, the harder we try to nail down our identity, the more elusive and troublesome it becomes. That's why some people can have everything they ever wanted and still feel unsteady. It's not about what they have or don't. It's about trying to find security by attaching it to ever-changing things. Understanding the idea of not self isn't just some theoretical challenge to unravel. While thinking about it can set the stage, the real transformation usually happens through intense meditation. This practice highlights how our sense of self is constructed by letting us observe it in action. As mindfulness deepens, you start noticing how often you label experiences as yours, build an identity from fleeting thoughts and emotions, and create boundaries to uphold this idea of a separate self. Discovering this can feel pretty unsettling at first, as it shakes up the fundamental beliefs about how we perceive our consciousness. Without a fixed self, who's having these experiences? Who's making choices or taking on responsibility? Who's even on this spiritual journey? These questions make us reevaluate what awareness really means. Experience still occurs, but it doesn't revolve around a separate self. Choices are still made, but they arise from a combination of conditions, not from a single decider. Responsibility remains important, but it's seen as something shared throughout the interconnected web of causes and effects, rather than linked to one specific individual. The Buddha addressed these concerns by distinguishing between conventional truth and ultimate truth. In everyday life, it's okay to use I and you, mine and yours, self and other. These words help with communication, organizing society, and understanding moral responsibilities. But in the grand scheme, these labels don't point to solid, independent entities. They're like the imaginary lines of longitude and latitude on a map. They help us navigate, but aren't real lines etched into the earth. Understanding this distinction means you can function in daily life while remaining aware of the deeper reality of interconnectedness and change. Embracing the concept of not self leads to profound and liberating changes. Much of our mental stress comes from defending and enhancing this separate self-image. Recognizing selfhood as a construct, not a solid reality, frees up a lot of psychological energy for more creative and compassionate living. You can have preferences without being tied to them, support views without needing others to confirm them, and enjoy experiences without being confined by them. The tendency to react defensively, which fuels much human conflict, starts to fade because there's less of a separate self to guard. This insight into not self also transforms your whole motivation for spiritual growth. Instead of trying to improve or transcend yourself, you begin to see through the self that seemed to need improvement or transcendence. It's not so much about reaching a future state of enlightenment. Rather, it's about understanding that the self striving for enlightenment is part of what needs to be examined. The practice becomes less about becoming a better person and more about realizing there isn't really a person to become in the first place. This shift makes the spiritual journey both more grounded and profound. Additionally, as wisdom develops, compassion naturally flows. When you realize that the lines between yourself and others are concepts we've made up, not true separations, caring for others becomes as natural as caring for yourself. Others' pain does not seem like it's happening to a stranger. Instead, it happens within the same shared awareness that includes your own experiences. This fresh way of seeing things transforms ethics from a set of rules you have to follow into something that arises naturally from understanding. Seeing past the notion of a separate self also changes your view on death and change. Without a permanent, continuous self, there's nothing lasting to be lost when a person dies. Death isn't the end of a self, but rather a transformation in the configuration of the 5 aggregates, which continue in new forms driven by cause and effect. This doesn't imply individual survival after death, but it shows that the fear of moving from being to non-being is based on a false view. So, death isn't the end of a self, but merely the dissolution of a temporary pattern in the ever-flowing processes of nature. Part 6. The Ever-Changing River. Everything we know is always in flux, constantly flickering in and out of existence, never remaining the same. This concept, called ana in its original language, is one of Buddha's fundamental insights into how things actually are. Even though it's clear once you see it, coming to terms with this impermanence is a real challenge for many of us. Our minds tend to struggle with the idea of continuous change, and that struggle is often the root of the suffering we encounter daily. Buddha's journey into understanding impermanence began with a close look at his own experiences. Every breath has a starting point, a middle, and a conclusion. Thoughts arise, hang around briefly, and then vanish. Emotions build up, reach a peak, and naturally disappear. Physical sensations emerge, shift, and eventually fade. Even more ingrained issues like long-term depression or persistent anxiety are made of countless tiny moments of appearing and disappearing, if you really zoom in to notice. This pattern of emerging and dissolving applies beyond just feelings and thoughts. It's something that affects everything around us. Your sense of self is forever changing as new experiences reshape your identity, and old memories either change or fade away. Relationships evolve as people encounter new scenarios and grow on the inside. What you hold as true or meaningful changes with time as new information challenges what you used to believe. Even your body is always transforming, with cells dying and being replaced, molecules coming together and breaking apart, and energy in constant motion. But Buddha didn't just stop at noticing change. He dug deeper, realizing that what appears as continuous existence is actually a series of countless brief moments of appearing and disappearing, occurring incredibly quickly. A solid table isn't really solid. It's a hive of billions of atoms buzzing and exchanging energy. What seems like a constant stream of thoughts is actually made up of millions of fleeting moments of awareness. Reality, at its essence, flickers more like a movie than a still picture. Grasping this aspect of reality drastically changes how we understand suffering and its potential resolution. Much of our mental pain comes from trying to make something permanent when everything is, by its nature, impermanent. We want good times to last indefinitely, bad times to stop immediately, and our sense of identity to stay the same. But given the transient nature of existence, these desires are unrealistic. Blocking change is like trying to halt a river or freeze the sunset. It just builds tension and leads to frustration. Buddha identified 3 ways resisting change causes suffering. First, simply clinging to happy moments that inevitably fade brings on the pain of loss. Falling in love carries the fear of losing it. Success brings anxiety about maintaining it. Achievements are shadowed by worries about future mistakes. We often blame circumstances for this suffering, ignoring the true cause, impermanence. The second way is more subtle. Fighting against inevitable unpleasant occurrences adds needless discomfort. Physical pain turns into unbearable distress when thoughts like, "This shouldn't happen," or "When will it stop?" crop up. Sadness or fear become challenging mental battles when we resist instead of letting them pass. This resistance fosters tension, which leads to further resistance. The third way is the most elusive and pervasive. It's that underlying anxiety of just being alive, knowing that nothing is going to stay the same. Even when everything's great, there's this persistent insecurity because, good times can't last forever. It's like you're always tiptoeing on fragile ice, unable to fully relax because change could crash in any minute. This suffering is so ingrained in our minds that many see it as a normal part of life, rather than understanding it's about resisting inevitable change. Buddha offered a way to handle impermanence that doesn't involve giving up or ignoring reality. It's what might be called radical acceptance. This mindset is about aligning your thoughts with the natural ebb and flow of life, instead of fighting against it. Radical acceptance isn't about just accepting whatever life throws your way without question. It's about getting smart enough to know when you can actually make a change and when you just need to let things unfold on their own. You can put in the effort to set your life up correctly, but controlling the outcomes is a different story, because those hinge on so many factors you can't manage. Learning to accept that nothing stays the same usually happens step by step. First, you might get that conceptually. Everything changes, but emotionally, you're still catching up. You know that good times won't last forever, yet it still hurts when they fade. You understand that tough times will pass too, but you still struggle against them when they're happening. This stage matters because it's the foundation for going deeper, although you haven't yet overcome the habits of holding on and resisting. Next, you start noticing change firsthand through mindful awareness, seeing thoughts, feelings, and sensations come and go right in front of you. This direct observation starts to break down the illusion that experiences are unchanging, making it easier to let go when things shift. You develop what's known as change readiness, a handy mental agility that helps you adapt to new situations instead of being stuck in the past. In the most profound sense, you come to realize that impermanence isn't a problem, but is at the heart of life itself. Change becomes a gateway to freedom instead of a source of stress, since it means tough times don't stick around and you needn't cling to the good ones. You begin to appreciate the freshness and creativity that constant change brings. A world without change would be boring, monotonous, and essentially lifeless. The elements that make life exciting, like growth, learning, and evolving personally, all depend on things not staying the same. This new way of thinking about impermanence pays off in practical ways quickly. Making decisions is less stressful because you know nothing is final, and you can change course when new information comes up. Your relationships with people become less clingy since you can see them as they are now, instead of boxing them into roles or expectations. When it comes to future planning, you're more flexible, ready to adjust your goals as things change. Even getting older and your body changing becomes easier to accept because you see these as parts of life's natural flow rather than personal failures or cosmic unfairness. Plus, Buddha taught that understanding impermanence can really help when dealing with heavy emotions like anger, fear, or sadness. Just remembering that these feelings won't last forever can lessen their grip on you. Instead of getting caught up in why you feel a certain way or what action you should take next, you can simply watch the emotions come and go and eventually fade away. It's not about ignoring your feelings or pretending they don't matter. It's about recognizing their temporary nature and allowing them to pass. This understanding also changes how you approach your spiritual journey. Instead of chasing a permanent state of peace or enlightenment, you start to appreciate the ever-changing aspect of an awakened mind. Wisdom isn't reaching a point. It's about adapting to whatever the world throws at you. Compassion isn't a fixed feeling. It's about continually responding to the suffering around you. Liberation isn't a final destination. It's an ongoing practice of letting go. This perspective makes the journey more humble and manageable because it relieves the pressure of chasing some perfect state. Grasping the idea of impermanence deeply also highlights how everything is interconnected. Nothing changes by itself. Everything is related. When you change, your relationships change. When those change, the people around you change too. Their changes then impact their relationships, creating a ripple effect that never really stops. This awareness makes you more mindful of how your thoughts, words, and actions influence the ongoing web of life. It makes you feel more responsible, but not overwhelmed, because this responsibility is shared throughout the interconnected network. Part 7. The Web Without a Weaver. Nothing stands on its own. This idea is one of the most profound insights of Buddhist philosophy and challenges the foundational beliefs people hold about reality. Referred to as pratitya samutpada or dependent origination, This notion illustrates that everything relies on certain conditions to exist, emerges through relationships, and fades away when those conditions shift. Understanding this interconnectedness not only transforms your view of the world, but also reshapes your understanding of yourself and your part in the vast network of life. The Buddha's exploration into interdependence kicked off with a simple yet revolutionary question. How do things come into existence? People tend to think objects and experiences are separate entities that later interact. However, the Buddha saw it differently. Things don't start as independent entities that then relate. They exist because of their relationships. Nothing exists innately or independently, as every existence depends on causes and conditions for its start, duration, and conclusion. Think about the basic act of seeing a tree. This experience needs the tree itself, functioning eyes, adequate light, a nervous system to process the visuals, and past experiences to make sense of the light and shadows as a tree, among many other factors. If any of these elements are missing, the tree-sighting experience won't happen. This experience doesn't initially exist, then seek out these conditions. It arises because these conditions align. When conditions change or disappear, so will the experience. This concept applies to everything, including mental states, emotions, and your sense of self. Anger doesn't just sit in your mind waiting to be activated. It comes up when certain conditions align. A particular situation, a story about it, physical tension, memories of similar experiences, and other psychological and environmental factors. Change any of these, and the anger changes or fades away. Anger exists only because of these interdependent factors. The Buddha summed up this understanding with the principle of dependent origination. This arising that arises, this ceasing that ceases. This principle applies to all situations, from plain physical events to intricate psychological happenings. Seeds begin to grow when the right conditions, soil, water, temperature, and sunlight, come together. Thoughts arise when consciousness interacts with objects through the senses, along with attention and memory. Suffering comes about when craving meets impermanence and the idea of a constant self amid ever-changing conditions. Liberation occurs when wisdom meets craving within ongoing mindful reflection. The traditional teaching of dependent origination uses a 12-link chain to illustrate how suffering perpetuates through cycles of conditions. It begins with basic ignorance about the nature of reality, especially misunderstanding impermanence, suffering, and the illusion of self. This ignorance leads to karmic formations, actions based on misunderstanding that shape future experiences. These formations affect consciousness, which in turn affects name and form, influencing the 6 sense bases, leading to contact, creating feelings, igniting craving, resulting in clinging, causing becoming, leading to birth, and ending with aging and death. Although this traditional view might seem complex, it describes mental processes that happen countless times daily. Each moment of unconscious reaction strengthens mental patterns that affect how you perceive and react in future situations. Every act of craving builds stronger neural pathways for more craving. Every instance of resistance increases the likelihood of resisting again. Each time you identify with your thoughts and emotions, it reinforces this identification, making it more automatic and compelling. Suffering perpetuates itself through these cycles of learned responses, But the same principle that explains its continuity also shows how we can interrupt and eventually stop it. Swapping ignorance for understanding starts changing the cycle. By seeing clearly how our mental states develop based on conditions, we can skillfully work with them instead of being controlled by them. Knowing how craving leads to attachment allows us to intervene in the process before it overwhelms us. When we understand how identifying with things causes pain, we can learn to approach experiences with a looser grip. Understanding interdependence shows why personal freedom is linked to universal freedom. Since everything's connected, our happiness is tied to everyone else's. Our moods affect those we encounter, their reactions influence their other connections, and these ripples spread throughout existence. Similarly, others' joys and struggles impact us through the same interconnected web. This makes compassion more than a moral choice. It's a reflection of reality. Realizing interdependence shifts our view on personal responsibility. We're not completely in control nor utterly helpless against outside influences. Our actions and mindset shape our experiences, but these conditions also affect how wisely we can respond. We're both architects and products of our circumstances, being cause and result. This awareness fosters a shared responsibility where you own your role while recognizing it exists within larger, uncontrollable patterns. Interdependence also explains how change happens in complex systems. Many think change is straightforward. Do something different. See immediate results. But the Buddha's teachings reveal that change comes through small, interconnected shifts that often aren't instantly noticeable. Tiny, consistent tweaks in one area can eventually overhaul the whole system. Big changes that ignore interdependence often fall apart, and realizing this can instantly boost spiritual growth and personal progress. Instead of forcing change with sheer will, you create conditions that naturally foster the change you seek. To develop patience, focus on your thoughts, feelings, stress, environment, and relationships all at once, not just resisting impatient reactions. To grow compassion, explore what opens or closes your heart, gradually leaning towards openness. Seeing interdependence changes how we handle tough times and tricky relationships. Rather than viewing problems as hard barriers needing brute force, see them as arrangements of conditions that can be shifted with smart interactions. A difficult relationship is a dynamic process where everyone involved brings their conditioning, responds to each other, and can change the overall pattern with their choices. This viewpoint unlocks creative options invisible when thinking of separate entities fighting for control. A deep understanding of interdependence reveals how arbitrary our usual categories and boundaries really are. The lines between self and others, inside and outside, success and failure, good and bad, appear as useful tools rather than absolute truths. It doesn't erase these distinctions, but helps us manage them more easily and skillfully. You can navigate typical categories successfully, remembering their creations, not just discoveries. The Buddha used various metaphors to explain interdependence, each shedding light on its essence. Imagine reality as an enormous web of jewels, where each jewel reflects all others, so changing one jewel affects the entire web. Picture existence as a tree whose roots, trunk, branches, and leaves all depend on each other to thrive. Think of consciousness as limitless space, allowing everything to happen within it, while still being touched by all that appears. These metaphors aim to shift our perception beyond the typical subject-object split and highlight the seamless unity beneath apparent divisions. Part 8. The impact of our choices. Every decision we make sets off a chain reaction that affects the future. Known as karma in Sanskrit, this idea is one of Buddha's clearest insights and an essential lesson for living wisely. However, Buddha's view of karma isn't about balancing scales or a mystical system of rewards and penalties. Instead, it's a smart take on how our conscious mind is shaped by the choices we make, paving the way for what we'll face later. Karma means action, but Buddha emphasized intentional actions, choices made deliberately rather than on impulse or reflex. Every thoughtful idea, every word we choose to say, and everything we do on purpose creates ripples that impact our future experiences. These actions are like seeds planted in the garden of our mind, ready to sprout when conditions are just right. Understanding this principle gives us a clear path to steer our spiritual growth and mental health. Buddha identified 3 types of karma based on how we express intentional actions. Mental karma includes all our conscious thoughts, intentions, and attitudes, especially those we purposefully nurture. Verbal karma involves more than just our spoken words. It includes writing, body language, and the tone of our silence in various situations. Physical karma concerns actions done with awareness, like helping or harming someone, adjusting our posture, or the care we use when handling things. But Buddha's teachings go deeper than just listing different actions. He pointed out that what matters is not the action itself, but the intention behind it. The same action can have different results depending on whether it's motivated by greed, anger, and ignorance, or by generosity, kindness, and wisdom. For example, donating to charity can build positive karma when done out of genuine compassion, but may lead to negative karma if done for applause or tax benefits. Telling the truth can be helpful when aimed at clarity, but can be harmful if it's intended to wound with harsh truths. This focus on motives shows that karma is more about shaping our consciousness than chasing rewards or avoiding punishment. Every deliberate act reinforces the mindset that inspired it, making similar emotions and actions more likely. Acts of kindness increase your ability to be kind. Mindfulness in one moment makes it easier to be mindful in another. Wise choices cultivate more wisdom within. On the other hand, selfish acts bolster self-interest. Choices born from anger foster more anger. Confused acts lead to more confusion. Karma is all about consciousness shaping itself through the choices it makes. Buddha also noted that the effects of karma manifest at different times, depending on factors like the strength of the intention, the nature of the action, and the circumstances in which it happened. Some karma acts fast, showing results within the same lifetime or even the same day. Harsh words might lead to immediate conflict, kind acts to instant happiness, or lies to anxiety about being caught. Other karma takes longer to settle in, sometimes not surfacing until future lives, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Buddha's teaching on karma extends beyond individual actions, emphasizing the collective influence of repeated patterns over time. The Buddha pointed out that our mind tends to follow certain patterns depending on the habits and behaviors we consistently practice. If someone always responds to tough situations with fear, they'll likely become more afraid over time. Conversely, if they tackle problems bravely, their courage and self-assurance will grow. These mental habits go beyond just shaping a person's everyday life. They also influence the kinds of situations and relationships they encounter because, in the realm of consciousness, like energies attract each other. This understanding of habitual karma presents a clear path for personal transformation. Rather than relying solely on sheer willpower to alter deeply ingrained patterns, you can proactively develop opposite qualities through conscious and consistent practice. Want to build patience? Start by practicing patience in minor scenarios until it becomes second nature in more challenging ones. Hoping to be more compassionate? Focus on cultivating kind thoughts and actions until responding with compassion to others' struggles becomes automatic. This approach aligns with how the mind naturally evolves instead of going against the grain. The Buddha's teachings on karma also clarify that not all experiences stem from past karma. He identified various sources of suffering, such as those arising from present choices, natural physical events, unavoidable external factors, and the conditions inherent in having a physical body. This understanding prevents people from misapplying the concept of karma as a way to unjustly fault individuals for their circumstances, or to rationalize social injustices as spiritually deserved. While karma does account for some experiences, it doesn't explain everything in life. The connection between karma and rebirth is one of the more complex aspects of Buddhist thought. The Buddha taught that consciousness endures beyond physical death, taking with it the accumulated karma from a lifetime's decisions and actions, which affects future rebirths and associated life conditions. However, this should be viewed in conjunction with his broader teachings on personal identity. It isn't a permanent soul that continues, but a stream of conditioned consciousness shaped by past intentions and actions, more akin to one candle lighting another than moving a person from one house to another. Even without subscribing to the idea of literal rebirth, the psychological principles behind karma can be directly understood by self-observation. Every conscious choice impacts future thoughts and behaviors. Every deliberate action shapes future opportunities. Every moment dedicated to mental training affects how the mind will handle future challenges. These processes occur throughout life, regardless of what happens after death. Understanding these ideas offers practical insights for spiritual development, independent of metaphysical beliefs. The Buddha also shared practices for purifying negative karma while enhancing positive karma. By acknowledging wrongdoing and expressing genuine regret, we can lessen the harm of negative actions by understanding their detrimental effects and committing to making better choices henceforth. Acts of generosity, kindness, and service can help undo selfish patterns from previous actions. Mindfulness and meditation can disrupt automatic reactions before they result in new negative karma. Most importantly, gaining insight into the nature of reality can transform the entire karmic process by revealing the illusion of the self that seems to accumulate karma. The ultimate goal of understanding karma isn't to perfect control over outcomes, but to nurture wisdom that transcends the cycle of cause and effect. When consciousness sees through the illusion of self and recognizes the interconnectedness of all things, the desire to create karma naturally diminishes. Actions will still occur, but they'll arise from wisdom and compassion, not from the desperate need to build and maintain a separate self. This is what you'd call higher-level karma. It's all about doing good things to liberate everyone without being attached to the idea of a single person taking action. When you think about karma, the takeaway is that every moment gives us an opportunity to guide our mind through the choices we make intentionally. Past habits aside, being mindful in every moment allows us to make choices that steer us toward greater freedom, wisdom, and empathy. That's why the present moment is crucial for spiritual growth. It's the only time we can really make karma. The past is set in stone, and the future is shaped by our current decisions. However, the present is alive with the potential for change through deliberate intentions and smart actions. Part 9. Understanding the essence of awareness. Consciousness is incredibly personal to us, but remains a bit of a puzzle. Every single thing you've experienced happened within this awareness. Every idea began there. All your feelings, senses, and sights popped up in this space of conscious knowing. Yet, when you try to pin down consciousness itself, it slips away like liquid silver, avoiding typical logical thought. The Buddha's exploration into the nature of the mind is perhaps his most nuanced and profound contribution to human understanding, revealing that consciousness is both the root of all suffering and the pathway to true freedom. The Buddha starts by clearly distinguishing consciousness from its contents. Typically, our awareness is so caught up with what it perceives that it never examines the act of knowing itself. You're aware of your thoughts, but rarely notice the awareness that they arise in. You feel emotions, but often overlook the process of feeling. You perceive sights and sounds, but seldom reflect on the act of perceiving. This habitual looking outside makes us believe that consciousness is generated by its contents, rather than recognizing that these elements appear within consciousness. The Buddha identified 6 types of consciousness linked to our senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind. Each arises when its corresponding sense organ meets something appropriate, along with the presence of attention. Eye consciousness happens when you see things and are attentive. Ear consciousness occurs when you hear sounds with awareness, and so forth. Mind consciousness emerges when you engage with thoughts, memories, feelings, and other mental activities, focusing inward. But the Buddha's exploration into consciousness goes deeper than just outlining different sensory awareness types. He discovered that consciousness itself doesn't have fixed attributes, except for its capacity to be aware. Unlike its ever-changing contents with specific qualities, consciousness is like open space, allowing everything to arise without changing. A mirror reflects anything, but the reflection doesn't change the mirror's ability to reflect. Similarly, consciousness can be aware of anything but remains unaffected by what it's aware of. This understanding clarifies why getting caught up in mental and emotional content leads to suffering. When consciousness begins to identify with its contents, it gets entangled in their changes, conflicts, and limitations. If you think your thoughts define you, troubling thoughts can cause suffering because they seem to threaten your sense of self. If you believe you are your emotions, you ride their highs and lows because your happiness appears tied to having the right emotions. If you define yourself by roles and achievements, any threat to these outer identities feels like a threat to your very being. The Buddha's insights revealed that this identification is unnecessary and arises from a misunderstanding. Consciousness doesn't need to cling to anything to retain its natural state of awareness. Thoughts can arise and fade without impacting consciousness. Emotions can pass through without disturbing its inner calm. Sensations appear and disappear without altering the capacity to experience them. Understanding that consciousness is inherently free from its contents is incredibly liberating. Learning to see consciousness typically begins with noticing the contents of awareness without getting wrapped up in them. This involves developing metacognition, the ability to be aware of awareness itself. Instead of just getting lost in our own thoughts, you start recognizing that you're actually thinking. And rather than experiencing emotions without a second thought, you become aware of them running through your mind. This transformation from being engrossed in our experiences to merely observing them can bring a huge sense of freedom. It helps you realize that you're not just defined by what's happening in your mind at any given time. As you get better at this mindset, you may stumble across what's known as witness consciousness, a state where you're fully present, watching all mental activity without getting carried away. This witness isn't just another thought or mental state. It's more like your awareness acknowledging what's happening inside it. From this perspective, even the strongest emotions or thoughts are just temporary blips in broad awareness rather than threats to your core self. Finding this space can be a huge relief, as it shows there's a part of you that's always peaceful and untouched. But the Buddha's teachings take this further than just recognizing witness consciousness. He poses a question: is there really a separate me experiencing everything? When you dig deep, what do you actually find? Is there a definite you owning consciousness? Or is it consciousness fooling you into thinking there's a someone aware? This questioning often reveals that what seems like the experiencer is just another fleeting moment in your mind, as insubstantial as any thought or feeling. Grasping this leads to what some call non-dual awareness, realizing that consciousness and what it embodies aren't separate. It's like water's wetness or fire's heat, simply qualities of something whole. Consciousness needs something to be aware of, and experience needs consciousness to exist. This view blurs the usual line between subject and object, showing everything as a unified reality, not split into different parts interacting. Buddha delved into various states of consciousness accessible through deep meditation. He mapped out a series of progressively refined states called jhana. Each of these states is marked by deeper levels of focus, calmness, and mental harmony. In these states, regular thought patterns ease off, allowing you to access hidden layers of consciousness typically masked by the constant chatter of thoughts and emotions. These focused states offer not just a temporary escape from mental turmoil, but also provide a clear bird's-eye view for exploring true awareness. In the deepest meditative states, Buddha referred to something known as the cessation of perception and feeling, where conscious activity momentarily stops. Those in this state often say that while consciousness seems paused, awareness continues on a level that's beyond words. This suggests that consciousness isn't created by mental activity, but is the canvas for all mental happenings. Buddha's exploration of consciousness also touches on the connection between personal and universal awareness. While recognizing that each of us has a distinct consciousness influenced by our experiences and karma, he also hinted that fundamentally, all consciousness has a shared essence. Much like the individual waves on an ocean, our minds appear as expressions of a universal awareness. This idea lays the foundation for genuine compassion, recognizing that others' suffering and our own are part of the same vast field of consciousness. Recognizing consciousness like this has profound and immediate practical impacts. Once you understand that you're different from your thoughts and emotions, handling psychological stuff becomes a breeze because they stop affecting your true self. Tapping into the natural peace and stability of your consciousness makes external events unable to disturb your lasting sense of calm. When you start to see the unity of awareness, the imaginary boundary between you and the outside world begins to blur, revealing the connection that's always been there. The Buddha's dive into consciousness shows that true freedom doesn't come from going beyond or changing consciousness, but from recognizing its true nature. Consciousness is already free, already peaceful, already whole. The feeling of being stuck or suffering comes from wrongly linking your identity to the fleeting experiences within consciousness, rather than acknowledging it as the ever-present stage where everything changes. True freedom isn't something you achieve. It's about realizing you were never really limited to begin with. Part 10. Exploring Inner Worlds, the Heart of Meditation. In Buddhism, meditation isn't just about chilling out, even though it can be incredibly soothing. It doesn't involve escaping reality, though it gives you a peaceful space away from mental chaos. It's also not about self-hypnosis or positive vibes, even if it changes how you handle tough emotions. Buddhist meditation is really about building your awareness step by step. It's a straightforward way to grasp the mind and reality by seeing them directly instead of just theorizing. This approach might just be humanity's most sophisticated tool for understanding the mind. Everything Buddha taught can actually be validated through meditation, making it more of an exploration than a belief. All Buddhist meditation techniques are centered around what's known as sati, often translated to mindfulness, but it's deeper than that simple term. Sati is about being completely aware of the present moment, seeing things clearly without bias, staying attentive without getting tangled in thoughts, and wisely telling apart helpful from harmful mental states. These mental skills create a solid base for exploring reality as it truly is, free from usual assumptions and automatic responses. Buddha set out 4 foundations of mindfulness, acting as a complete guide for focusing and gaining insights. They cover all areas of human experience, ensuring no aspect of life is left ignored. Mindfulness of the body involves being aware of your breath, posture, movements, and physical sensations. It keeps you grounded in the present, helping you steer clear of endless mental noise. This practice anchors you in your body's reality instead of floating in thoughts and ideas. Mindfulness of breathing is especially important as it's the main focus in most Buddhist meditation practices. The breath is perfect for focusing because it's always present, rhythmic, connects mind and body, and is neutral enough not to trigger strong emotions. But mindfulness of breathing is more than just counting breaths or using them to relax. It's about being keenly aware of each breath, noticing the subtleties of inhaling and exhaling, the natural pauses, and how breathing changes with mental states. You start to perceive the rise and fall of each breath as distinct moments of awareness. As you dive deeper, you realize that breathing, which seems simple, is actually full of intricate details. Each breath differs in texture, temperature, rhythm, and depth, all shifting with your physical and mental state. Even the space between breaths isn't just empty, it buzzes with awareness. You begin to see how breathing and thinking intertwine as mental activity influences breathing patterns and vice versa. This discovery, finding complexity in the seemingly straightforward act of breathing, trains you to find deep meaning in everyday experiences. Mindfulness of feelings is the second foundation, focusing on the basic feeling tone in every conscious moment. Before you even recognize an experience or spin stories around it, there's a short instance where you feel good, bad, or neutral. This initial feeling tone appears naturally and is not an issue at first, but it quickly triggers automatic patterns of desire and aversion, leading to mental distress. Learning to catch this feeling tone early, before these reactions occur, gives you a vital tool for breaking the cycle of craving, which Buddhism sees as the root of all suffering. Keeping track of feeling tones needs real precision and patience, since these sensations are often brief and subtle. A pleasant feeling can fade in moments as it turns into a desire to sustain it, followed by anxiety about it vanishing. An unpleasant feeling tone quickly gets buried under resistance and the stories about how it shouldn't be there. Neutral ones. They usually go unnoticed because the mind is on the hunt for something more stimulating. Mastering the skill of spotting these feeling tones before they trigger reactions is like catching a spark before it turns into a flame. Next up is being mindful of your mind. Here, you take a step back from what's crowding your thoughts and watch how the whole thing plays out. Instead of getting sucked into specific thoughts or feelings, you recognize different states of mind as they ebb and flow. It's like noticing anger without getting angry, or seeing fear without feeling scared, and catching desire without letting it run the show. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, observing mental events without letting them take control. This mindfulness practice shows that lots of psychological pain doesn't actually come from tough thoughts and feelings, but from mixing them up with who we really are. When you see anxiety as just a temporary visitor in your mind, everything changes. It's still uncomfortable, no doubt, but it doesn't disturb your basic sense of self anymore. Watching your angry thoughts float by like clouds weakens their hold because you're not attached to them anymore. This shift from identifying with thoughts and emotions to just watching them is one of meditation's coolest insights. Then there's mindfulness of phenomena, the fourth foundation, which involves observing how life's events pop up and disappear according to natural laws rather than personal choices. It's about diving into the three universal truths that the Buddha taught: impermanence, suffering, and no fixed self. With ongoing observation, these truths start to reveal themselves right in front of your eyes instead of as just ideas. You start seeing thoughts appear out of nowhere and then vanish. Emotions rise and fall, and sensations are always changing without anyone making it happen. Understanding this undermines the illusion of control over your experiences or thinking they should match what you want. This isn't a downer. Instead, it's freeing because you understand trying to control everything was never needed. Instead of forcing experiences to fit your expectations, you can simply go with the flow. It's not about giving up, but rather about smartly aligning with reality's real nature. The Buddha also taught specific meditative practices to enhance concentration, which is the ability to focus entirely on one thing for an extended period without distractions. While mindfulness is about remaining open to whatever arises, concentration involves deep focus, which gradually aligns the mind and reveals deeper aspects of consciousness. The Buddha described 8 stages of concentrative absorption, known as jhanas, each with its own qualities of joy, calm, and mental harmony. These states offer a break from psychological stress and provide a foundation for deeper insights into reality. The first jhana occurs when your mind is so focused on its meditation subject that typical mental noise quiets, allowing for stable attention accompanied by joy and physical pleasure. This blissful state demonstrates that happiness doesn't rely on external factors. It can stem from training your mind. When you reach the second jhana, even the effort to stay focused fades, leaving just pure joy and peace. The third and fourth jhanas lead to cooler states of calm where even joy is seen as a mental action that's eventually unnecessary. Beyond these, the Buddha mentioned deeper states called the formless absorptions, where focus shifts from physical sensations to a higher awareness. In the stage of infinite space, you realize awareness is boundless. In the infinite consciousness stage, you understand this boundless awareness is vibrant and mindful. In the nothingness stage, you discover that regular consciousness isn't the deepest level. The stage beyond even perception and non-perception reaches such a subtle awareness it defies ordinary description. While these focus states are immensely peaceful and insightful, the Buddha emphasized they're mere tools for gaining the wisdom needed for complete freedom. Sometimes, people become so captivated by these states that they mistake them for enlightenment. But the Buddha noted they're simply conditioned experiences, ones that come and go. True freedom involves understanding all conditioned states, even the most refined meditation states, without getting attached to any particular level of consciousness. The jhanas greatly support insight practices by enabling you to clearly explore how everything arises and passes away based on natural laws. Buddha also brought in walking meditation to complement the sitting practice, showing that awareness needs training when we're still and on the move. In walking meditation, you focus mindfully on your steps, just as you concentrate on your breath during sitting. You pay attention to lifting, moving, and placing your feet, noticing how your weight changes, how your muscles work, and how you keep your balance while walking. This helps blend mindfulness into everyday life, challenging the idea that it's only possible during structured meditation. Integrating meditation with daily life is key in Buddhism. Lessons and skills learned in formal meditation should gradually extend to everything we do for real changes in awareness, not just temporary breaks from normal habits. This means bringing a meditative attitude to activities like eating, cleaning, walking, and even during conversations. Soon, the gap between meditative practice and regular life begins to disappear as awareness becomes a continuous presence instead of something you switch on and off. Buddha concluded his teachings by saying that, in the end, there's no meditator, no meditation technique, and no goal to achieve through meditation. These terms help kickstart the journey, but should be left behind as one progresses. What's left is pure awareness, consciousness, directly understanding its essence without relying on concepts or methods. That's the true result of meditation, not reaching some special state, but recognizing what's been there all along beneath our mental layers. Part 11. The Essence of Awakening. Buddhist ethics don't come from strict religious rules or social expectations. They evolve from understanding the true nature of reality and the effects of different actions. When you grasp the interconnectedness of everything, hurting others feels like hurting yourself. Recognizing the illusion of ego in selfish actions reduces the desire for such behaviors. When you see the suffering caused by greed, hate, and delusion, embracing generosity, love, and wisdom isn't about following a set of rules. It's about making sense of life. Buddhist ethics focus on what Buddha called the three sources of good deeds, avoiding greed, hatred, and delusion. These ideas aren't just about the absence of negative traits. They represent positive mindsets with their own benefits. Not being greedy manifests as sharing, feeling satisfied, and valuing what you have instead of constantly craving more. Avoiding hatred comes across in acts of kindness, patience, and responding wisely during tough times instead of reacting with anger. Not being deluded involves seeing things accurately, comprehending them fully, and not letting fear or wishful thinking distort your view. The practice of giving, or dana in Sanskrit, is a fundamental piece of Buddhist teachings because it directly counters the clinging mentality that leads to pain. Being generous isn't just about handing out possessions, it's about shifting from a scarcity mindset to one of abundance. It's realizing that gripping onto objects, experiences, or ideas causes anxiety, while letting go brings more happiness and freedom. Real generosity involves giving without strings attached, not keeping score or using gifts as a way to manipulate or gain others' approval. Buddha spoke about levels of giving based on how spiritually advanced someone is. Beginners might give material gifts, but hold on to their attachments, seeking recognition or feeling a sense of pride in their generosity. Those at an intermediate level are more open, but still see themselves as do-gooders. High-level generosity breaks down the separateness of self, gift, and receiver, understanding that these concepts often interrupt the flow of care and support. Loving kindness, or metta, is another cornerstone of Buddhist ethics. It's not about forcing yourself to feel happy or pretending to be nice. It's a mental practice that breaks down emotional barriers between individuals. You usually start by cultivating genuine goodwill towards yourself because it's challenging to care for others when you're wrestling with your own mind and feelings. Practicing self-kindness is an intelligent way to foster self-care, providing the stability needed to effectively look after others. Once comfortable with yourself, you extend kindness to loved ones, neutral people, those who are difficult, and eventually to everyone, everywhere. This growth pushes against the typical mental splits like us versus them, friend or foe, deserving or not. Practicing this reveals how these divisions are arbitrary and only limit connection and happiness, while encouraging stress and conflict. By opening your heart to more beings, the artificial barriers of loneliness and isolation crumble. The Buddha also had methods for managing anger and resentment, realizing how challenging these emotions can be when trying to cultivate loving kindness. The traditional approach isn't about suppressing anger or letting it take over, but rather understanding its roots to change its energy. Anger often surfaces when something you care about feels threatened or violated, shedding light on your values and concerns. To manage anger effectively, you need to extract this valuable insight while letting go of the harmful emotional charge that can harm you and others. Exploring the stories that fuel anger is an effective approach. Anger doesn't just appear because of events, but due to your interpretation of them, especially if you believe someone threatens you or undermines your vision of how things should be. By examining these stories more closely, you might discover they rely on assumptions about others' intentions which may be incorrect. Most people are just doing their best with what they know and their circumstances, even if their actions create problems for you. This doesn't mean that you should excuse bad behavior, but it helps you avoid additional suffering by not taking everything too personally. Karuna, or compassion, goes a step further than loving kindness by tackling suffering head-on. While loving kindness is all about hoping for everyone's happiness, compassion aims to free people from their suffering and works towards achieving that. Real compassion requires both strength and wisdom, because it means being willing to face suffering without getting overwhelmed and responding thoughtfully instead of reacting in the heat of the moment. From a distance, compassion can sometimes look harsh, like when you have to say no to requests that would only encourage bad habits, or when you choose not to support comforting but ultimately harmful collective beliefs. The Buddha pointed out a difference between emotional compassion and wisdom compassion. Emotional compassion feels others' pain and wants to fix it right away, which can lead to exhaustion and actions that might accidentally contribute to more suffering. Wisdom compassion, on the other hand, focuses on addressing the root causes of suffering, not just its symptoms. This might mean letting people deal with the outcomes of their actions or offering guidance and support to encourage growth rather than just giving immediate comfort. Wisdom compassion works well because it's not about fixing everyone's problems, but about creating a space where people can develop their wisdom and strength. Practicing mudita, or finding joy in the happiness of others, is one of the trickiest parts of Buddhist ethics for many people. It's about truly celebrating when others are happy or successful, even if it feels like it comes at your own expense or highlights your own flaws. This practice challenges the constant urge to compare yourself to others, a habit that breeds feelings of envy and competition. Being genuinely happy for other people's successes, no matter your own circumstances, signals a shift from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance. Nurturing mudita helps you see how much mental energy gets eaten up by comparing yourself to others and feeling either superior or inferior. When you can cheer on others' successes without feeling like you're losing something and appreciate their good qualities without feeling overshadowed, you gain a lot more room to concentrate on your personal growth and contributions. It's not about ignoring your own needs or goals, but approaching them from a place of inner abundance instead of ruthless competition. Mudita transforms relationships from a win-lose setup, where one person's victory means another's loss, into shared celebrations of everyone's potential for happiness and fulfillment. Equanimity, or upekkha, is the highest form of ethical development and supports all other positive traits. It's not about being detached or indifferent, but having a balanced awareness that stays clear and responsive regardless of what's happening around you. It's all about figuring out the difference between what you can control and what you just need to accept. The key is staying composed when things are chaotic and being adaptable enough to handle unexpected situations. Equanimity allows you to care deeply for all living beings while keeping the broader picture in mind and understanding the role you play in it. The Buddha offered practical advice on ethical living to nurture these qualities. The 5 precepts guide you away from actions that lead to suffering for both yourself and others. Avoid killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and using substances that cloud your judgment. These precepts aren't just random rules. They're based on understanding how our actions affect our minds and relationships. Following them thoughtfully helps create peace, trust, and clarity in personal and social settings. The rule against killing goes beyond obvious violence to encompass all kinds of unnecessary harm to living beings. This involves being mindful of the impact your lifestyle has on others, how your words might hurt, and how your thoughts could contribute to a culture of hostility. On the positive side, this precept encourages you to respect and nurture life in all its forms, and think about how you can support life rather than just avoid harm. This might mean choosing eco-friendly products, speaking kindly, and cultivating attitudes that promote life. Buddhist ethics suggests that true morality is deeply connected to wisdom and mental clarity. When you rely only on willpower for good behavior, it tends to get rigid and tough, breaking down when things get tough. But when your moral compass is guided by recognizing how everything ties together and the effects of what we do, it's like practicing wisdom rather than following rules. This deeper drive makes living ethically feel less like a burden and more like a joyful journey, truly enhancing who you are. Part 12. The Bloom of Understanding. Buddha recognized that awakening doesn't follow a one-size-fits-all path. People need different approaches based on their personalities, life circumstances, and where they are in their mental journey. This led to the creation of various Buddhist schools and traditions. Each highlights certain aspects of the overarching teachings while sticking to core principles like the nature of suffering, its causes, and how to break free from it. Rather than seeing these varied paths as conflicting with the original message, they show just how deep and adaptable Buddha's insights into human awareness and the nature of reality really are. By understanding these diverse practices, you might identify the ones that best suit your journey and also find value in those that seem foreign. The Theravada tradition, which translates to the teaching of the elders, is all about personal liberation through a gradual practice focusing on ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Central to this tradition are the historic Buddha's teachings found in the Pali Canon, emphasizing that enlightenment is achieved through personal effort and isn't something that can be transferred from an outside source. Their meditation practices usually involve closely observing how things come and go, helping you recognize key truths like impermanence, suffering, and non-self through direct experience rather than theory. This path is great for those who are drawn to straightforward, practical advice and are motivated by the wish to be personally free from suffering. Generally, the Theravada journey moves through specific stages of awakening, each stage revealing a deeper understanding and release from the mental quirks that cause suffering. The first stage, called stream entry, happens when practitioners realize the constructed nature of personal identity and the pointlessness of seeking lasting happiness through worldly things. Though stream enterers haven't completely gotten rid of suffering, They've seen through fundamental illusions that keep it in place, ensuring further progress, even if it spans multiple lifetimes. The next stages focus on reducing cravings and aversions, and the final stage is about total freedom from emotional suffering. The Mahayana tradition, or the Great Vehicle, prioritizes the liberation of all beings, not just individual enlightenment, acknowledging that personal and collective freedom are connected. A key part of this is the Bodhisattva ideal, someone committed to helping everyone achieve enlightenment, even if it means putting their own liberation on hold to assist others. Mahayana philosophy delves into profound concepts of emptiness, understanding that things don't have an inherent existence. They only come into being through causes, conditions, and labels. This approach attracts those who naturally lean towards service, understanding that their personal growth is tied to the well-being of others. In Mahayana, the insight into emptiness goes beyond the Theravada examination of non-self, applying to everything, not just personal identity. Everything exists due to a complex network of relationships, not individual isolation. This view dissolves artificial barriers between self and world, sacred and ordinary, showing that reality is interconnected rather than separate. Understanding this universal emptiness forms the bedrock for boundless compassion, as the supposed divisions between your well-being and others are revealed as mental constructs, not absolute truths. Within Mahayana, Pure Land Buddhism offers a path that's particularly appealing for those who find the task of achieving enlightenment through sheer personal effort overwhelming. This way of thinking shows a strong dedication to Amitabha Buddha, an enlightened being who created a pure land designed to nurture spiritual growth. Believers who truly have faith in and call upon Amitabha's name can aim to be reborn in this pure land, where it's easier to reach enlightenment, unlike in our world full of distractions and obstacles. This journey transforms the individual's path from a solitary struggle into a shared experience, enriched by enlightened wisdom, always ready to provide support and direction. Zen Buddhism, which emerged from blending Indian Mahayana teachings with Chinese Taoist philosophy, emphasizes a direct experience of the true mind without relying on words, theories, or step-by-step methods. Zen practice often involves rigorous meditation retreats, exploring paradoxical stories known as koans, and engaging with seasoned teachers who can identify and validate genuine insight. It draws in those who appreciate straightforward, practical understanding and welcome intense practice without needing detailed descriptions, viewing enlightenment not as a distant goal, but as something inherently familiar. Koans in Zen deserve special attention as they offer a unique way to transcend logical thinking and access direct insight. Rather than logical puzzles to solve, koans serve as exercises to exhaust habitual mental patterns, opening the way for non-conceptual awareness. Famous koans like "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" or "What was your original face before your parents were born?" require a different approach to understanding beyond mere logic. Engaging with koans helps practitioners see the limitations of conceptual thought and develop confidence in the mind's capacity for immediate, intuitive knowledge. Tibetan Buddhism has safeguarded and evolved the most comprehensive set of Buddhist teachings, synthesizing elements from all earlier traditions and incorporating sophisticated psychological strategies from Indian tantric practices. This approach acknowledges that individuals are at different stages in their spiritual journey, presenting a structured path with appropriate practices for beginners, those at intermediate levels, and advanced participants. Tibetan Buddhism is particularly recognized for its detailed exploration of mental states and emotions, its gradual approach to cultivating compassion and wisdom, and visualization practices leveraging the mind's power to create and transform reality. Through imagination, the Tibetan approach to developing compassion includes exercises to dismantle the barriers that block natural empathy. A practice known as Tonglen, or exchanging self and others, involves consciously taking in others' suffering while offering them comfort and joy, challenging the ego's tendency to avoid pain and seek personal gratification. This might seem harmful or mentally damaging, but when conducted properly, it reveals that much of what we view as suffering is really resistance to natural human emotions like sadness, fear, and disappointment. By learning to breathe through difficult emotions instead of resisting them, practitioners gain the ability to remain present with suffering without being overwhelmed by it. The tantric aspect of Tibetan Buddhism offers advanced practices for those who have developed sufficient stability and ethical grounding to safely work with powerful psychological energies. These methods understand that the same mental energies leading to suffering, when expressed unconsciously, can serve as pathways for rapid spiritual growth when deliberately harnessed. Tantric practice includes sophisticated visualization techniques, chanting mantras, and rituals that involve the entire self, body, speech, and mind in the process of transformation. If you're someone who learns better by diving right in rather than just watching or sitting still, this approach might suit you more. Lately, Western approaches to Buddhist practices tend to zero in on meditation and psychological insights, often skipping over things like rebirth, rituals, or deep philosophical theories. These tweaks have made Buddhist practices more inviting for folks who aren't into traditional Asian religious rituals, but still keep the essential parts of practice that deal with psychological struggles. Programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction and acceptance and commitment therapy prove Buddhist principles can be pulled out of their traditional backgrounds without losing their life-changing benefits. This trend shows that the Buddha's thoughts on awareness and suffering resonate across cultures, pointing to universal truths rather than being limited to specific cultural beliefs. The variety within Buddhist traditions highlights that there isn't just one right way to put the Buddha's teachings into practice. Instead, there are many effective ways that fit different people, cultures, and times. No matter the school of Buddhist thought, the key takeaway is that suffering stems from misunderstanding reality, and this can be adjusted through persistent practice of awareness, good behavior, and wisdom. Even though the methods to nurture this awareness can vary a lot, the core ideas about change, how everything is connected, and the way personal identity is built remain constant. This flexibility is what lets Buddhist teachings continue to grow and adapt to fresh challenges while keeping its vital role in easing human suffering. Part 13. Steps to Liberation. Waking up on a spiritual level isn't a sudden burst. It's more like a gradual journey where you start pulling back the layers of illusions causing your pain, with each step bringing a bit more freedom and clarity. Buddha mapped out this path in detail, highlighting the insights at different stages of understanding and explaining the mind shifts that occur as you get to know your true self. Getting a handle on these stages can keep you motivated, help set realistic goals, and prevent feeling frustrated when progress seems slow or being too quick to declare victory when you're still learning. The key is realizing liberation isn't about reaching some far-off place, but about letting go of the mental stories that block the peace and freedom already inside you. The first major milestone in this journey to liberation is called stream entry. This is when you get a clear, unwavering grasp of some basic truths about life. Those who reach this point haven't completely gotten rid of suffering, but they've seen through the core misconceptions that fuel suffering, guaranteeing further progress, even if it takes a few more lifetimes. This stage involves 3 vital insights that change how our mind interacts with life. These include a hands-on understanding of how all things are fleeting, a deep realization that chasing permanent happiness through external things is pointless, and recognizing how our sense of self is just a mental story. For someone who reaches stream entry, understanding impermanence moves beyond just a mental concept and becomes a felt reality, where everything in life is seen as popping in and out of existence rapidly. This insight shatters what Buddhism calls the illusion of permanence, where we unconsciously believe things are solid, stable entities rather than always changing processes. When this illusion falls apart through direct experience, you stop desperately clinging to experiences because you see there's nothing solid to hold on to. This doesn't wipe out your natural likes or the joy of good moments, but it takes away the frantic urge to make those fleeting moments last. Realizing the uselessness of seeking everlasting happiness in conditioned experiences is perhaps the most down-to-earth benefit of stream entry. Stream enterers have firsthand realized that every experience, no matter how awesome or meaningful, carries seeds of its own disappointment, because no experience can satisfy the endless craving of consciousness. This realization doesn't lead to a gloomy outlook on life or pulling away from it, but sparks a shift in what drives you, from seeking happiness by collecting experiences to uncovering a happiness not dependent on specific conditions. This change dissolves the background anxiety fueling a lot of compulsive behavior, opening the door for more genuine engagement with whatever life throws your way. Stream enterers' understanding of the made-up nature of personal identity blows apart what Buddhism calls personality view, the belief in a fixed, continuous self separate from changing situations. This doesn't mean losing all sense of identity or not being able to function in social settings where a conventional sense of self is required. Instead, they see personal identity as a useful tool, like longitude and latitude, handy for navigation, but not something physically real. This realization takes away the desperate need for self-concern because there's less of a feeling of a rigid self that needs defending or fixing. Stream enterers also develop unwavering trust in what's known as the 3 jewels. The Buddha, who found and shared the path to liberation. The Dharma is all about grasping reality and learning the ways to fully understand it, while the Sangha, SA, is basically a supportive community helping each other on this path. It's not about blindly following. It's about trusting your personal experiences and knowing firsthand that the path truly delivers. Stream enterers have tasted liberation, so they're certain that real freedom from suffering is attainable because they've seen a glimpse of it. This deep assurance fuels their motivation to keep practicing, even when progress is slow or challenges arise. After stream entry, people's behavior naturally shifts to avoid harmful actions toward themselves or others. It's not because of an outside moral rule, but because they intuitively understand how everything is connected. So they're unable to intentionally harm or cause deep suffering, since they see that hurting others affects the entire interconnected web they're part of. They also avoid extremes, neither depriving themselves too much nor overindulging, realizing that neither approach leads to genuine freedom. The next phase, once returning, focuses on reducing those emotional habits that cause friction or inner unrest. They haven't completely eliminated greed, hatred, and delusion, but these qualities appear less often and with much less intensity due to continued practice. Sure, anger, desire, and confusion still occur, but they're less intense and fade more quickly without triggering a cascade of negative emotions like before. This stage is called once returning because these practitioners are thought to be just one human life away from complete liberation. In the third stage, non-returning, the goal is to overcome all cravings and aversions linked to the sensory world. Non-returners leave behind the patterns that make us cling to good times or avoid bad ones, achieving a profound balance that remains stable no matter their circumstances. They're free from the restless searching that ordinary consciousness is trapped in, having discovered a deeper fulfillment that isn't dependent on any specific conditions. At this point, they won't reincarnate in human form because the desires and fears that keep humans tethered have vanished. Ultimately, reaching arahatship, or total liberation, means completely getting rid of all psychological suffering by fully comprehending reality's true essence. Arahants have extinguished the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion so entirely that these cannot flare up again. This doesn't mean feeling emotionally numb. Rather, their responses arise naturally from wisdom and compassion, free from selfish distortions. They embody the Buddha's promise that suffering can be entirely eliminated, proving through their own experiences that the human mind holds endless potential for freedom and peace. The traits of full liberation give arahants a distinct edge over earlier stages. They enjoy a deep, unshakable inner peace, unaffected by any external or mental turmoil. Their confidence in understanding reality isn't rooted in arrogance. It's the result of having examined it until all doubts dissipated. Their ethical behavior flows naturally, not from deliberation. Since their actions spring from wisdom, not conflicting desires and fears, arahants embody what's known as the divine abodes. Boundless kindness, compassion, joyful empathy, and balance touch all living beings without exception or requirement. They aren't just feelings, but consistent mindsets that appear once self-centered walls come down entirely. Arhats don't love because people are likable. Their compassion stays intact even if their help is turned down. They can be happy for others without a hint of jealousy, and they stay balanced whether faced with compliments or criticism, victories or setbacks, joy or hardship. This way of being represents the peak of human emotional potential when freed from automatic reaction patterns. The Buddha mentioned abilities like mind reading, remembering past lives, and seeing karma's impact arising with deep meditation. However, he pointed out these are secondary effects, not aspirations, warning against becoming attached as it can hinder true progress toward freedom. Real success isn't about gaining extraordinary talents, but freeing awareness from the grip of suffering. A fully awakened person might display amazing skills or appear entirely ordinary, yet they always shine with peace, wisdom, and compassion. Today, some question if traditional awakening stages still hold or if they were unique to another era. Most modern scholars and teachers believe these stages still manifest, though cultural and individual factors might alter their appearance. Key insights in each stage appear to be universal facets of consciousness evolution, beyond just the Indian context. Grasping these stages offers valuable insights for contemporary practice while recognizing that awakening today might include aspects that weren't highlighted in the past. Part 14. Beyond just fearing life's end, death challenges our spiritual beliefs, where philosophical ideas meet the raw uncertainties of existence. The Buddha's take on death and the afterlife shows his practical outlook and deep understanding of consciousness. Rather than comforting myths or scary stories of life after death, he delved into how being afraid of death increases suffering, offering practical ways to find peace in life's inevitable shift. His thoughts on death not only illuminate life's end, but also how to live with an awareness of mortality. The Buddha's exploration of death began by recognizing that a lot of our mental agony doesn't come from death itself, but from our fear of it that lingers over everyday life. This fear runs deep, from obvious worries about pain and the unknown to a sneaky dread of losing our sense of self, pushing us to seek endless meaning and security. It shows up as fear of failure, fading into obscurity, being forgotten, or not having enough time to do everything. It drives a desperate grip on youth, frantic pursuits of achievements and possessions, and endless attempts to control what cannot be controlled. The Buddha taught that confronting death's truth directly, instead of avoiding it, can lessen suffering and enhance appreciation for life. This doesn't mean becoming obsessed with dying, but rather recognizing that death is natural, universal, and uncertain. Meditation on death often involves thinking about the inevitability of death, uncertainty of its time, realizing only spiritual growth matters at the end, and that time is running out. These reflections aren't to depress, but to ignite urgency and gratitude for the conscious life we have. Witnessing the death process through others or meditating on the body's breakdown shows death as natural rather than a catastrophic loss. Classic Buddhist texts describe how consciousness pulls back from the body at death, from basic physical functions to more subtle mental activities, until what's left is core awareness. These teachings help not only in understanding death, but also in using meditation to connect with these subtle levels while alive. Being prepared this way can make dying less terrifying, bringing peace and awareness during the transition. The Buddha's teachings on the afterlife were detailed, avoiding speculation on the unknowable. He pointed out that consciousness continues after physical death, carrying karmic patterns formed by actions over lifetimes, but without suggesting an unchanging soul exists. Death is more like one conscious moment evolving to the next, instead of a person traveling from one place to another. What continues isn't today's you, but a stream of conditioned consciousness shaping your current identity. In Buddhist psychology, rebirth means consciousness takes form in new circumstances, aligning with past karmic habits. This isn't some cosmic justice from an outside force, but a natural outcome of countless moments of intention and action. Those who cultivate generosity, wisdom, and compassion often find themselves in situations nurturing these traits. Conversely, those driven by greed, hate, and delusion typically find environments that echo these negative patterns. Rebirth isn't just about different human experiences. It could mean entirely unique forms of consciousness, from deep suffering to wild bliss. Still, the Buddha emphasized that pondering rebirth specifics matters less than living wisely now. Whether consciousness goes on after death through multiple lives or ends with the brain's cessation, Buddhism's core truths stay constant. Suffering comes from hidden mental habits that can change with awareness, ethics, and wisdom. Steps to reduce suffering and enhance genuine happiness work regardless of beliefs about life after death. This practical approach stops Buddhist practice from becoming a fantasy about future lives, while keeping open to realms potentially beyond what science currently understands. For those who do believe in rebirth, the Buddha shared ways to help you gear up mentally for death and rebirth, assisting in making the whole process smoother and more deliberate. This means getting comfortable with deep meditation, developing positive mind states that influence rebirth, and gaining such clarity that even when life's turning topsy-turvy during death, your mind stays alert. Some advanced practitioners might even manage to pick their next life setting, choosing a path where they can aid more folks in reaching liberation. This showcases the bodhisattva aspiration, aiming not just for personal freedom, but using it as a springboard for boundless compassion. The Buddha also explained how fear of death wanes with deeper understanding, not through comforting stories about the afterlife, but by knowing what death truly impacts and what it doesn't. Though death closes the chapter on our current physical self, it doesn't touch the essence of awareness, which remains stable amidst the chaos. It also spares the positive energy from good deeds, which continues to ripple through future lives. Most importantly, true liberation from seeing things as they are isn't undone by death, because it never relied on specific bodily or mental conditions in the first place. Growing older is like practice in gracefully handling and releasing changes, paving the way for the ultimate release, that is, death. Each stage of life demands letting go of former roles, skills, and connections that no longer fit, offering real-life lessons in living harmoniously with change. People who age wisely often notice that releasing old attachments opens up space for new joys and engagements that couldn't exist while clinging to past stages. This insight makes facing death less intimidating because it's not about losing something real, but completing a lifetime where yielding to change has been beneficial. Buddhist funeral and mourning practices echo this understanding by emphasizing the positive impacts and enduring influence of the deceased, rather than focusing solely on grief and loss. Grieving is natural when losing loved ones, but Buddhist psychology points out that excessive mourning can disrupt the deceased's peaceful passage by tethering their consciousness to past connections. When someone departs this life, the most compassionate response is to wish them well on their next journey, while using this moment as a nudge to appreciate the time we have with those still around. This perspective shifts death from a source of heartache to an opportunity to deepen our spiritual growth and kindness toward others. When the Buddha was nearing his own end, he taught that death is simply a natural change, not a catastrophe. Before he passed, he's said to have remarked, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Work out your salvation with diligence. These words inspire an acceptance that everything temporary eventually fades, coupled with the encouragement to make the most of the time we have. It shifts the perspective on death from being a mystery to solve or an enemy to defeat, to simply being an inevitable end to be met with the same calm awareness that we strive for in life. Part 15. Keeping the teachings alive. Fully understanding Buddhism goes beyond how deep your meditations are or the volumes you've read about its teachings. It's about integrating these insights to ease suffering and find genuine happiness in everyday life. Making ancient wisdom relevant in today's society without losing its impact is an extremely challenging and essential aspect of spiritual development. This last phase of practice isn't about dodging life or rising above it. It's about immersing yourself in life's highs and lows while nurturing the inner calm that comes from seeing the world as it truly is. When you seamlessly incorporate Buddhism into daily life, each moment becomes a part of your spiritual path rather than a detour. The secret to this is realizing that every human experience is covered by Buddhist thought. Balancing work and family life, dealing with finances, managing health challenges, handling relationships, and embarking on creative paths all present chances to apply ideas like impermanence, interconnectedness, and selflessness. It's not about reaching some ideal form of Buddhist perfection. It's about being more aware, compassionate, and wise, treating life's hurdles as opportunities for growth rather than barriers. This mindset transforms everyday issues from sources of frustration into chances for greater understanding and habit forming. In family life, the key is balancing the understanding that identity is a construct while meeting day-to-day responsibilities. By realizing that roles like parent, child, spouse, or sibling are temporary labels that don't define permanent entities, you can still prioritize your family's well-being. This dual awareness often strengthens family bonds because it reduces knee-jerk emotional responses, fostering deeper care free from possessiveness or control. Family becomes a chance to practice unconditional love rather than seeking affirmation and identity. Bringing Buddhism into the workplace involves aligning your job with deeper values, recognizing that no single job can give you ultimate meaning or certainty. In today's world, right livelihood is often more about finding work that minimizes harm and contributes positively rather than fitting into a perfectly ethical box. The most important is to bring mindfulness, ethics, and a mindset of service into any role, steering clear of ego boosts or status seeking. This change can add value to even the most mundane tasks and alleviate the pressure of expecting total fulfillment from your job. Money Matters offer a perfect stage to apply Buddhist insights on desire, satisfaction, and differentiating wants from needs. It's not about seeing money as corrupt or thinking wealth alone will solve deeper problems, but about cultivating a wise financial relationship that supports well-being without sparking worry or greed. This might involve simplifying life to ease financial burdens, practicing generosity to counteract possessiveness, or using finances for altruistic purposes beyond personal comfort. The goal is to have enough financial know-how to meet needs without getting caught in the endless cycle of earning and spending that characterizes today's economy. Health challenges, whether sudden or ongoing, present profound opportunities to practice embracing change and managing suffering insightfully. Instead of neglecting real physical pain or piling on mental strain through resistance, self-pity, or blame, the Buddhist approach involves embracing these experiences. Physical pain can actually teach us to separate unavoidable pain from unnecessary suffering, revealing that much of our distress is due to resisting what's already happening, not the events themselves. This doesn't mean ignoring medical care or accepting preventable illnesses, but rather addressing health issues with wisdom and self-kindness instead of fear and despair. Merging social and political activism with Buddhist principles can be tricky, as it requires finding a balance between personal growth and urging for changes in systems that cause widespread issues. The wise path avoids completely withdrawing from social issues or getting so caught up in political causes that one forgets the limits external solutions have in tackling deep-rooted human problems. Typically, Buddhist-inspired activism digs into the underlying causes of social challenges, which often are tied to personal feelings of greed, hatred, and ignorance, rather than just stopping at policy shifts or institutional reforms. This could mean advocating for justice with a steady mind or addressing environmental matters by acknowledging that meaningful change involves both shifts in consciousness and behavior. Romantic partnerships serve as intense arenas for weaving wisdom and love, demanding balance between grasping life's impermanence and the commitment that comes with intimate connections. In Buddhism, romance is about loving without ownership, committing without clinging, and nurturing your partner's growth without trying to control it. This approach enhances the passion and meaning in relationships by rooting them in genuine care for the other person's happiness, rather than simply trying to satisfy your own emotional needs. Arguments turn into opportunities for patience and effective communication, rather than battles over who is right. Over time, changes in relationships are met with a spirit of curiosity and adaptation instead of resistance and disappointment. Parenting might be where Buddhist practice faces the most rigorous test, demanding wisdom and compassion amidst the chaos of responsibility, sleep deprivation, and the ongoing need for selfless giving. It's about finding the solid balance of guiding kids while allowing them to develop according to their own nature rather than the projections or desires of their parents. Buddhist parenting emphasizes leading by example over directives, showing how to handle challenges wisely instead of reacting impulsively, while nurturing environments that let children's natural intelligence and kindness shine. This usually leads to nurturing more self-assured and robust kids, as they aren't pressured to meet their parents' emotional demands or achieve unrealistic standards. Creativity opens many doors to learn the art of letting go of specific results while engaging fully in the creative journey. In pursuits like art, writing, and music, the Buddhist perspective encourages creating from a place of joy and inspiration, not from a need for external validation or a fear of not measuring up. This involves putting your creations out there without being overly concerned about others' opinions. It's about striving for excellence without crumbling under imperfection, treating the creative process more like meditation rather than a boost for one's ego. Thus, creativity becomes a gift to share, not a way to seek self-glory or immortalize oneself through a lasting artistic footprint. Aging continually invites us to align with Buddhist insights as our physical capabilities dwindle and societal roles transform, necessitating ongoing adjustments to new limitations while cherishing the abilities that remain. In Buddhism, aging is not something to resist or surrender to. It's an opportunity to discover fresh ways to contribute and engage, harmonizing what you can do with your current life stage. This may mean transitioning from direct action to imparting wisdom, moving focus from physical activities to reflective ones, or shifting the emphasis from external achievements to internal growth. Aging well exemplifies that happiness isn't tied to youthful vigor. It can flourish as one learns to savor simple joys and deepen self-awareness. Integrating Buddhist practices with modern psychology and medical knowledge requires understanding when traditional methods suffice and when professional intervention is crucial for severe mental health issues. Buddhism offers profound insights and tools for managing everyday emotional challenges, but more severe conditions may require therapies extending beyond meditation or philosophical practices. Wise living involves drawing on all available resources, recognizing that spiritual practice alone doesn't have to shoulder the entire burden of human suffering. This mix can actually enhance both Buddhist teachings and typical therapies by giving a broader insight into mental health problems and offering more options to manage them. The real goal of this combination isn't about being the ultimate practitioner, but having the flexibility and understanding to tackle any situation without losing the connection to the inner peace and freedom that spiritual practice unveils. It's about feeling just as comfortable at a meditation retreat as at a family gathering, fully engaging with worldly matters while maintaining an awareness of their greater purpose, caring a lot about outcomes, but also accepting whatever comes. Blending these approaches effectively results in a life that's both genuinely human and spiritually rich, proving that awakening isn't about escaping the world, but enriching every part of the human experience with wisdom, compassion, and joy. This fulfills the Buddha's vision, not avoiding suffering, but transforming it into wisdom, not shying away from life, but exploring its endless opportunities for growth and service.